begin the process. And usually we invite someone to come and do a blessing or offering. And I'd just like to open it up. I did think of inviting a parent. We know that's a deeply challenging, And so I thought maybe to invite a parent up to offer a blessing for us. Any of you who parents? I can't see because you're all in the darkness. So whoever, you can't point someone out, Ruby. That's
parent, grandparent.
Parent or
and
parent?
Grandparent. That's me.
Do you want to come up?
Yes. No, it's too cold and hard to unwrap, but if I could sit here.
Yes. No. Okay, I'm being hardline. No, this is a blessing. I'd love you to come up, or someone to come up in front of the altar. Okay, that's good. Okay. Does anyone else like to come up and offer a blessing? Thank you.
I'm offering a blessing from the depths of my heart because I am so blessed to have been able to be a parent. My partner, as many of you know, has 5 children, and we have 8 grandchildren. And I honestly sometimes think I wouldn't be alive but for those children and those grandchildren. So may all of our efforts tonight go to provide encouragement to all of our children of this whole world and any of the rest of the worlds, because they need it and they deserve it.
Thank you. That's lovely. With the lighting as it is, I can't actually see any of your faces, and if I liked to be on stage and in the limelight, that would be fine. But I would really actually love to see you. So could we do the lights so that, thank you. Or some of them. Is it one? It's one or the other?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, but usually, let's use those. Somehow they're not quite as bad.
Okay. Could you tilt that lamp down?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah, how's that? Great, okay. Okay, bearable. 2. I need a screwdriver maybe to hold it. What? How's that? Thank you for your practice today. So this afternoon we talked about cycles of violence, how ignorance gets expressed in cycles of violence. Abuse, war, police violence, state violence, and in Buddhist languaging and understanding, we're acknowledging that as human beings we are vulnerable and deeply relational. So we know that without someone feeding us and touching us in particular, we would have died as young babies. So we are deeply relational, and that's another way of saying how vulnerable we are. In acknowledging that vulnerability and relationality, then we're also acknowledging how impactful ignorance is, how ignorance in that relationality triggers ignorance. If there's no mindfulness, that's what happens. If there's no quality of presence or awareness as a safeguard amongst other beautiful qualities, then ignorance triggers ignorance. And when we acknowledge how that happens over eons, that's what the Buddha said, generationally, over and over again. And I gave that small example of wanting to kill, which is an extreme example. But I'm sure for each one of us, there have been moments when we have wanted to hurt another being. You know, whether it's through saying something nasty in a fight with a lover or partner or family member, we have been moved by these energies in an unmediated way. And in acknowledgement of that, then, we get to feel together how deeply profound it is to have a practice that begins to intervene against that, that begins to challenge that cycle and in some way bring about different conditions in the ways that we've been practicing, both internally and externally, because they need each other. But whether it's internally or externally, we get to acknowledge together how sacred, how actually I don't think there's anything more important in life, really, than this work of intervening in that cycle. And that's what we're doing here. And so the Buddha said if we lived 100 years, it wouldn't be as healing as living one moment in mindfulness. And that comes from the very earliest teachings in the Dhammapada. And he's acknowledging the impactfulness of what one moment of mindfulness does, because it intervenes against those cycles. It has that capacity, awareness and mindfulness, general comprehension or bare attention, to perceive when something isn't skillful or wholesome. And I take Trump as my teacher over and over again, because there is a mind that has no blessing of intervention, of just cycles, and we can feel those cycles of unwholesome speech and actions, and how they trigger more unwholesome speech and actions, and it isn't intervened. And that is such profound suffering, to be driven by those energies without any capacity to stop. without having people, I'm assuming because he hasn't stopped, without having sanghas or members that are supporting him to intervene. Or maybe they are, but he can't. And then we see, when we sort of think about, I don't have such a nice house, for example, going back to that example. It's like, but I have the Dharma. And the Buddha considers that the highest blessing of all blessings. And that's what we're doing here. And it's deeply and profoundly honorable, this work. And when we, talked today about, or when I spoke about the Bodhisattva, that's why this work is the work of a Bodhisattva, because it's intervening in our minds in ways that always then get expressed in our relationships and in our actions. And that's the work of the Bodhisattva. So not only are we doing it, we also actually have a lot of mirrors in this lineage and also in our communities that help us to remember this capacity and why we're doing it. And to name one of our teachers that have been a teacher for many of us, and that's Thich Nhat Hanh, who grew up in the context of war and violence. And from a really young age, kept intervening inside of himself and in the community he was working with to bring about different conditions than the reactivity of killing and violence. And having grown up in situations where I've seen people murdered over and over again, I feel such profound gratitude to that commitment of Thai and the community that was living in Vietnam and the work they were doing to reframe reactivity and violence. And I personally am not sure if without the Dharma, if I would have been able to have done what he's done, and then base so much of his teachings on the work of then how do we create peace? Having come from a culture of war, how do I create peace? And his teachings have spread all over the world so beautifully because of the purity that they've come from, that deep faith and that incredible effort. And we can feel it, can't we? And that's why some of us have been moved to go to Plum Village, and if we think this is cold, it compares, nowhere does it compare to how cold the halls are in Plum Village in winter, and spending hours in listening to the Dharma talk. So. But we hang in there because of how our own wish for purity is mirrored. So giving homage to Thai, and then the two other people that I want to pay homage to for their mirroring the work that we're doing, and one is Ella Baker. And I want to call her in because Martin Luther King is called in so much, and actually Ella Baker did much of the work. And she went door to door for years organizing so that when king called for a march, it was through her organizing that people showed up. And actually, he didn't want to share power with her. He actually, people put her name forward to become the executive director, and he said no. And she continued the work. That trust in her own work and in the organizing, right? She didn't say, oh, well, okay, forget it then. I've done all this work and you're not recognizing me. She continued to work. That mirroring of the faith and confidence of the work, even when it isn't recognized, because she knew it was important. And then, lastly, because I want to hold the perfection and imperfection, or just the what it means to be a human being in Mahagosananda. Why is it that someone strikes such a deep chord in our being, and Mahagosananda has struck such a deep chord in my being? So for those of you who don't know, in Cambodia, there were tons of mines laid down, and so people weren't able to go into the fields and do their work, nor communicate with each other. And Mahagosananda started a walk and chanted every day, all day, the beginning of the Dhammapada, which is, hatred shall never cease through hatred. Hatred shall only cease through love. And knowing that he might die in one of those mines, he walked from village to village, and that yearning for a way out from people who was in deep trauma from the war was caught in this purity and courage of this being, and followed him. And there was like this, I don't know if any of you have read this and know how many people followed him, but a lot of people followed him. They got to a refugee camp and they stayed there, and they chanted this chant 24/7. People would take over, and then other people would take over. And it was a way that people found back into their hearts from this teaching. And so I want to acknowledge that the work we're doing, is held by these people, and him particularly, because he ended up with old age dementia, and he was living in the pagoda in Leverett when I was living in Northampton, and he came to a teachers' meeting, and we would find him wandering around, not sure where the dining hall was or what was happening in the conference. And I'm saying this because sometimes when we hold the mirroring of our possibilities, there's a tendency to idealize people, and in idealizing them, we turn towards ourselves and say, oh, well, there's no way I'm close to that. I'm envious and greedy and irritable and hating and everything else, and so I can't include myself in this intervention of the cycle of violence. But we can. Each one of us can, because every moment of consciousness is, and so now I want to go and just take 5 minutes as a reminder that every moment of consciousness is separate, distinct, and unique. And so in a thousandth of a second, there is a moment of consciousness, and then another, and then another, and then another. And do you remember how they're arising? They're arising through contact with one of the sense bases, right? So when a visual object comes into the field of the eyes, that object triggers consciousness. It's the co-arising of the object and consciousness, which is seeing consciousness, or sound and hearing consciousness, or taste and tasting consciousness, or what are some of the others? Touch consciousness, smell, who said smell? Smell consciousness, and one more? Mind, and mind consciousness. So a reminder that there's no one consciousness, but conditions triggering one of the sense bases as consciousness. And in each of those moments of consciousness, along with contact and a basic form of awareness, are either the wholesome or unwholesome energies. So when the Buddha says it's better to have one moment of consciousness with the wholesome factors in it than to live 100 years, we're acknowledging the profound impact of that one moment in 100 years of intervention. So that's saying we don't have to be perfect. But which of course, we're students of the Dharma, and we come to the Dharma, and so, we are mixtures of ignorance and wisdom. And we're acknowledging the sacredness of this work by contextualizing it and saying one moment more impactful than 100 years without it. So that's how impactful all our work is. Yeah. And I'm saying this because then I wanted to talk a little bit about the 4 divine abodes, because the conditions for the divine abodes to come into being is to acknowledge the virtue of our behavior and intentions, the generosity, the faith, the wisdom, to see the beautiful qualities that are living inside of us becomes the condition for calling into being those 4 energies, and they are loving kindness and compassion, sympathetic joy and equanimity. So, and then just also to acknowledge, because it's so easy to think of them as something out there that we have to get. Actually, they're all living inside of us, but covered. And so we want to uncover them through the power of our intentions and acknowledgements. The acknowledgement and the intention is what uncovers them so that they have space to manifest. It's not like we're making loving kindness happen. It's that we're awakening it. And so it's not just in human beings, to give an example, that it's in all of life. And I remembered as I was thinking of this talk of after the tsunami in Thailand, did you come across the story of the hippo and tortoise? Mm-hmm. That a hippo and tortoise found themselves together in some place, and they befriended each other and took care of each other. and I've forgotten all the details of the story, but the hippo would sort of curl up around the tortoise, and sometimes the tortoise would lead the hippo in some way. There would be the tortoise first, and then the hippo. I can't remember what to, but maybe the hippo had been hurt in some way, and so the very slow tortoise would lead the hippo to where there was some food. So that kind of befriending happens, and I've shared many stories which I won't share again, but to acknowledge that they're at the seat of life and that they're everywhere and can be awakened. And so awakened through our intention. And it is a mantra to keep acknowledging as a community that each intention always has a consequence. So when we mentioned, I can just say, may I learn to care, then even though I'm not caring and I just want to learn, that intention will bear fruit. It will bear wholesome fruit. And that is the greatest safety blanket. Better than the electric blanket Sue Hodes always gives to me, and I love that electric blanket. I have it on my bed now. I should have brought it for the Dharma talk. And this is even greater, knowing that I create safety and can create an internal safety through these intentions. May I learn. May I learn whatever it is that I want to, and it creates this environment. So, and then contemplating our own goodness, contemplating each of our goodness, that's a shorthand term for our generosity and virtue. And I don't mean something big, and you've heard me say this before, but I really want to emphasize it. But just holding the door open, just that, and contemplating that movement in the heart to hold the door open for someone following, just that, and feel it in the body, that wish to make something easier for someone else. Just how beautiful that is. Not to mention the more difficult things, like being on a steering committee or the board of Lotus Sisters. I don't know about you, but I don't think any of us really enjoy it. And we're doing it because we care about the Dharma flourishing for our community and creating conditions for this in particular, right? So it's, I think I get irritated almost every meeting, honestly. And I work with it, and I'm like, God, we just said that already, and why are we repeating it, or whatever it is. And that's how it is. It's fine. It's like that's my own particular mind, and it gets irritated sometimes, and I'm sitting there and I'm breathing and holding it. It's not like repressing the irritation or anything else, but rather knowing that there isn't a greater gift than creating the conditions for the Dharma. It holds all those challenges of being on a board, and not only on the Lotus Sisters board, but on the Dharma Dana board as well, 2 boards. So then when we think of, that each of us, maybe as a parent or whatever it is in our work, that we hold because we believe in our work, that becomes the condition for loving kindness, of acknowledging, oh, that's so beautiful and lovely. Of course you deserve love. Yeah? And if that seems impossible, because sometimes it is when we're really triggered, we can't even go there, then we find the gateway of whatever is alive in our lives that holds a lot of love. For some people it's a pet. You know, all my girlfriends have had pets, and they've loved their pets. You know, it's sort of been this vehicle for so much love and comfort and adoration, and so metta to a pet. Or if it isn't animals, plants, like that's my thing, metta to the trees. That I was, this is, you know, of course not a traditional way, but I was doing a solstice circle with peyote in Mendocino County on the Navarro River. And as dawn was coming, I looked up and there were these incredibly beautiful, like the trees here, redwood and cedar trees, and they spoke to me. And something inside of me got touched. And so when I couldn't access metta to any other person or to a pet or an animal, I could access metta for trees. I could sing. Couldn't say it, but I could sing. May you be safe and protected. May you continue to be able to bless us with the blessings that you give us. So finding that, did you read, I'm so tired now, the poet who wrote a poem about his suit from, is it Argentina or not Argentina, but Chile, the Chilean poet who wrote the beautiful, famous, he's a famous, yeah, Neruda. He wrote this poem to his suit, just really loving his suit. So it could be your clothes. And finally, one of my gateways, and maybe for you, is contemplating death. And it could be contemplating our own death, and therefore feeling the preciousness of our life. Or it could be feeling the death of those who are right now dying in our circles or who had died. And through the caring for that being, then turning it towards ourselves. So in any of these creative ways, committing to responding to our heart's yearning for our own love. And it could be using the traditional sentences of may I be happy and safe and protected, or it could be may I hold myself with love, or may I be free from harm or danger, or any other phrase. Sometimes none of those work, and I say may loving kindness infuse and suffuse through my body, touching and healing everything, every cell, every nucleus. And that's because I've been so sick in my life. That's what does it. it might be something totally different for you, but to find that way to answer that calling, because mindfulness needs the support of this kind of loving kindness, and loving kindness, of course, needs the support of mindfulness. And we can't do one without the other. We can't intervene without the other. Here's, I know, okay. I'm just going to, of course I had all 4 divine abodes, but it's late and cold, and so I'm going to stop. But let me read this one poem, and I had a story, but it is late and cold, so I will just read this poem and then stop. It's If You Knew by Ellen Bass, who, she talk about an elder in our community who wrote the first book on working with trauma and sexual abuse, and has done tons of work. And what did you say?
I was just saying the name of the book.
Yeah. Oh, what was it?
I think it was The Courage to Heal.
Yeah, The Courage to Heal. Wonderful. So, this is one of her poems. What if you knew you'd be the last to touch someone? If you were taking tickets, for example, at the theatre, tearing them, giving back the ragged stubs, you might take care to touch that palm, brush your fingertips along lifeline's crease. When a man pulls his wheeled suitcase too slowly through the airport, when the car in front of me doesn't signal, when the clerk at the pharmacy won't say, thank you, I don't remember they're going to die. A friend told me she'd been with her aunt, they just had lunch, and the waiter, a young gay man with plum black eyes, joked as he served the coffee, kissed her aunt's powdered cheek when they left. Then they walked her half a block and her aunt dropped dead on the sidewalk. How close does the dragon's spume have to come? How wide does the crack in heaven have to split? What would people look like if we could see them as they are, soaked in honey, stung and swollen, reckless, pinned against time? So let's not take a break, but just have 10 minutes of guided metta. Please feel free if you would like to lie down if you're really hurting, though I know the floor is cold, but whatever feels most cozy for you, and we can switch off the terrible lights for this. If it's cold tomorrow, we could think about moving to the other space because it's warmer then. So we'll see. Yeah, feel free to stand too for the metta. You don't have to lie down. You could stand and find whatever position is comfortable. And yeah. So please take a moment to appreciate your efforts of the many, many moments you've made, you've called into being rather, in practice of non-reactivity, just that. the moments of returning, appreciating the blessing of remembering that you have created through your efforts, that remembering arose and you remembered, oh, I'm here. Appreciating your generosity, how you've given in so many ways. And don't let your mind go to the negative, it's so easy. Stay with the positive, stay with where you've given. Supporting Lotus Sisters. Beautiful generosity. All the other organizations, or friends, or children, grandchildren. Demonstrations, turning up in bad weather. Feeling your caring. See where it lives in your body and how it does. May my love, my caring continue to grow and strengthen and bless my life. May it support my happiness. May I be willing to feel the love that's there in my body, in my life already. May I be willing to undefend my heart and feel my love. May I learn how. May I remember I'm beautiful. Deserving of respect, honor, and love. care for myself unreservedly. See if you want to find your own phrasing. If you feel ready, extending these wishes to all of us here. As I have wished myself these wishes of caring and love, so I wish them for you too. May you never be far away from love, nourished and held by it. To all those we're sharing the space with, the quilters and the church group. May they too never be far away from love. Kitchen workers and admin workers. Survivors of the indigenous people who lived here. May they never be far away from love, safety and protection. In your own way, allowing these wishes to extend out. mindful space and time. Thank you for your practice.